putting up the more than $300 million building. So they started taking the remains of Africans from the burial ground. Almost all were wrapped in newspaper. They were placed in cardboard boxes. Then they were kept in the basement of a gym at Lehman College in the Bronx. So I ask you, my family, how would you feel? How would you feel if someone in your family, someone you love, had been taken from their gravesite and later placed in boxes and kept in the basement of a gym? This would lead to protest and outcry, as the people would come together, stand together, cry together, sing, dance, and pray together. Their efforts would eventually stop the removal of remains. 419 were taken from the cemetery. The cemetery itself, 6.6 acres or 5 blocks. So look up, notice the red building, look to your left. For several blocks, 5 blocks, there are believed to be 15,000 people, enslaved and freed Africans, buried in a cemetery beneath the streets, the sidewalks, and the buildings. Because of protest and outcry, those remains would later be sent to Howard University, the top black college for the study of human remains. And there they would pick up boxes which basically had numbers on them. And they gave them an identity. For instance, they picked up a box that had the number 96 on it. Today we know 96 is more than just a number. 96 was a young man between 16 and 18. They picked up a box that had the number 22 on it. Today we know 22 was a child between 2.5 and 4.5 years. In 2003, the remains were returned and reburied here in the cemetery. In 2007, the outdoor memorial, and unfortunately, you cannot get a good view here, but hopefully, while you're here, we'll divide into smaller groups, lead you to the side where you'll be able to look in and record and take pictures. The memorial opened in 2007, and our state-of-the-art visitor center opened in 2010. Unfortunately, as you see, it's closed. And it's closed for your benefit. You see, we've removed the grass, the old sod. We've replaced that with new sod. So we're replacing the lighting here, so when one is here in the evening or at night, they can look over and enjoy the experience here. For those who can, if you look up, you'll see lights above the building. They're pointed down, so if you're here in the nighttime, it gives the essence of the moon shining down upon the African burial ground. They're also improving the drainage system, cleaning up this memorial, which will open to the public on October the 4th. October the 4th is significant because on October the 4th of 2003, that's when the remains were brought back from Howard University and reinterred, reburied here in hallowed and sacred ground. We, the National Park Service, were saddened with the passing of Dr. Mark Mack on May the 11th of this year. We pay tribute to Mack here at African Burial Ground. And on the inside, you will see a picture of Mack and other researchers as they work to tell the true story of enslavement and the accomplishments of those of African descent. So here, we acknowledge, we pay tribute, we celebrate. Though the story may get sad at times, we find strength. We find honor, for our story is being told. It gives me great honor and privilege to present to you our own Dr. Gregory Carr, who will now proceed from here with a libation ceremony. No other can perform a ceremony as he has performed here at African Burial Ground. Please, let's welcome. Woo! Hey. All right, do you think, Dr. Carr?
Thank you, Ranger Doug. And Ranger Doug is being kind. This is a libation that is just symbolic of the many libations that we do across the African world. Ranger Doug, these Rangers, Brother Rasul, they are the guardians of our ancestors. And as Professor Crooms has said, with Dr. Mack, with Professor Mark Mack, that brother was our guardian in Douglas Hall on the 3rd floor. If you've never been to the 3rd floor of Douglas Hall, to the Montague Cobb lab, it is still there. That is where our ancestors stayed until they were brought back in a ritual that began at Howard University. And ended right over here to the right, and they are reinterred, those 419 ancestors. More on that inside. Before we continue, we will go in our ritual tradition, and we will ask our elder, our dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Shegun Badageshin, and remember when he gave his talk on Omuluwabi, the word Ashe, a word from the Yoruba language of power. We will ask him to come forward and give us permission to continue, because we have to do things in ritual order. Dr. Badageshin, dean, will you come? May we continue.
All those who have passed before, to where they come from, to the hallowed grounds they tread, to the courage that they bore, to the many, many tribulations that they passed through, before libation, and we pay homage. The way we do it is that the younger gives it to the elder, and the elder gives permission to continue.
So, this is concrete. The best thing to do would probably be to pour it into the tree. Y'all have the drum. So, you can hit it when you feel moved. Y'all all right?
Excuse me.
We'll pour this into the tree. The water symbolizing purity. We're made mostly of water. The ground, of course, symbolizing the other elements out of which we are created. The only element that's not in this water and that's not in this ground is the element that allows us to be here. And of course, that is that great Ashe, that force, that spirit. And that's why we say the word Ashe, because in this symbolic remembering of the water with the earth, we are calling our ancestors. So the first libation we will pour is to the great creative spirit, by whatever name you know that spirit, whatever name in spirit, in science, the many names that come from throughout the world, the first of which came out of Africa, whether it be Olodumare, whether it be Nyame, whether it be Amun, whether it be whatever name you know that spirit to be, in whatever faith tradition you have, or if you just know that spirit to be the great animating force. Ashe, we pour to those ancestors who came out of that spirit, the first human beings on the planet, the first human beings coming out of the Great Rift Valley of East Africa, who walked forward on 2 legs to populate the world not once, not twice, not 3 times, but multiple times, to colonize and populate the whole world. But those Africans we pour, those who walk through, those we know as Dinkanesh, the wonderful one, those we know as mitochondrial Eve, those ancestors, the mothers and fathers of everyone who has come beyond. Ashe. We pour for those ancestors who remained on the continent and who walked throughout the continent, those who created the first meals, those who cooked the first meals, those who taught the first lessons of how to stay alive, those who raised the first buildings, those who created mathematics and science and writing and astronomy, and who charted the stars, and who planted the first crops, and who brought the first animals in to give us sustenance, those who found themselves by many names. Ashe. Ashe. We pour to their children, those who learned the first languages and taught them to each other and to their children, those in the great language systems we refer to now as the ethnic groups of Africa. The Yoruba and the Akan and those of the Wolof and those in the Senegambia and those in the Kikongo, the Mbochi and the Bambara, those in the southern part of Africa, the great Nguni language speakers, the Xhosa and the Swana and the Sotho and the Zulu, those in East Africa, the Amharic, those in the Great Rift Valley, y'all call them out. The East Africans don't want to come, but they're coming now. The Dinka and the Shilluk and the Nur. We pour to the Baganda in the Great Rift Valley, and those in Rwanda, the Wahutu and the Watusis, the great ethnic groups of Africa. Ashe. Ashe. We pour to those who found themselves set upon and cast adrift in the boats as they came to the coasts of West and Southwest and Southern and East Africa. Those who Professor Beatty told us about this week as he talked about the great dispersal, the great diaspora. We call to those ancestors in memory of those who found themselves cast adrift in the Windward and Leeward Islands of the Caribbean, in Latin America, in North America, those who were set upon by the French, the Dutch, the English, the Spanish, the Portuguese, those who found themselves learning the languages that blended their languages with the new languages, often with the first names of out their lips saying, Madre de Dios, or oh my God, or Mon Dieu. Those who found themselves in Port-au-Prince and in Port-au-Spain, in Haiti and Trinidad. Those who found themselves in Brazil, who found themselves in all across South America, and who found themselves in the great port cities of North America, New Orleans and Charleston, who found themselves in Norfolk, Virginia, in Philadelphia, who found themselves sold into enslavement in Washington, D.C. and New York City. Here in the African burial ground, our ancestors, Ashe. Ashe. We pour to their children, our ancestors who fought their way out of enslavement, who fought their way into new days, the Maroon communities of the Caribbean, and Queen Nanny of the Maroons, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and Toussaint Louverture, and Henri Christophe in Haiti, the great Maroons of Suriname, and the Africans who raised palmares in Brazil to resist, and those Africans who hid in the great dismal swamp of the Carolinas and Virginia in North America, and their children who fought the great Civil War to emancipate a race in North America. Ashe. Ashe. We pour to their children, our ancestors, who having set themselves free through struggle, remigrated. Those who migrated to places like New York and Boston and Buffalo and Cincinnati, who went westward into the West Coast to places like Los Angeles and Portland. Those who found their way out of St. Louis and out of Mississippi and out of Alabama and Tennessee, who remigrated and found themselves in the northern cities, struggling to make a way, praying for your generation to come, to make their sacrifice worthwhile. Ashe. Ashe. We pour to their children, our ancestors, your great-great-grandparents, your grandparents, those in your living memory, the elders who you barely remember as children, who made their transitions. We pour to those bloodline ancestors, and we ask as we pour this libation and these next several pours that you call the name of your ancestors, those who you knew and those whose names were told to you. Let us call their names. Okay, what Carr has for Carr, Della Carr. Call y'all folks. We pour a special libation to a brother who gave his very life, not only for his students, but for the preservation of the memory of these ancestors. And in pouring this libation to Mark Edward Mack, we pour a libation to those he stood shoulder to shoulder with. The folks who came to this burial ground and yelled, "Stop!" when the bulldozers came to build this building. Those who drummed, as Brother Rasul could tell you, who drummed in this area for day after day, week after week, keeping overnight vigils. Those who came back to this area, who came for the reinterment, who have become ancestors since. We pour to our young ancestors in the name of Mark Edward Mack. Ashe. Ashe. We pour two more times. This time we pour an affirmation. For everyone here, we pour for these rangers who stand guard. We pour for our faculty and staff who have come with us today to accompany us. We pour for the drivers who got us here safely. We pour to your family members and friends at home who know that you came here today and who anxiously await word of what you will experience. We pour, in other words, to those whose tongues still move, whose hearts still beat, whose eyes still gaze, and whose minds and souls still pray every day for you to accomplish the thing that you have come to this university to accomplish. Ashe.
Ashe.
And finally, we pour to the beautiful ones, as Ayikwe Arma would say, who are not yet born. Those who will be the heirs, in the words of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, of something torn and new. Your children's children's children, who will come here and repeat this ritual, and because of what you have done, will receive the memory of their instruction for the next generation. Ashe.
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 Raise your dove. Total, we're sitting right at 200.
At 200.
Yes.
Okay. We're now going to separate